I'm Mike, and today a Q&A in which I get the chance to shove a bunch of completely unrelated topics into a single video because they're your questions. First, we're going to start off with the circle of life justification for eating meat, and then the concern that animals will overrun the world in a vegan world, and finally, if wearing faux fur promotes or glamorizes real fur fashion. Alright, first let's look at the circle of life justification. This is the idea that everything dies, and animals eat other animals, and death begets life in nature, so we should feel completely justified just killing animals to eat them. Now, I could just call this an appeal to nature fallacy, that just because it's happening in nature doesn't mean it's ethically right, but that would be too easy and there's so much more to say. I usually see this argument when somebody is totally backed into a corner, they've gone through all their other arguments, and all logic and ethics are out the window. And for that reason, I think for most people, it's probably an afterthought argument. No vegetarian was like, oh, that circle of life scene in The Lion King was so touching that I felt like I needed to start eating meat again. This is not a good enough reason to start eating meat. No, you already eat meat and you are searching to justify your pre-existing habits. And a side note here, everybody always talks about The Lion King in this context, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that is a scene about the circle of life of reproduction and rebirth and continuing life. Do you think all those antelopes and herbivores were running and lining up and being like, ooh, the circle of life, let's get slaughtered, yay? No, and zooming out and looking at the bigger picture, this comes down to how with great power comes great responsibility, as Voltaire or Uncle Ben from Spider-Man both said. With the great power we've amassed as a species to kill animals and also make ethical decisions, we have the responsibility to make the decision that isn't gonna harm those beings that are less powerful to not eat those animals. So because we can do it, and because animals do it, and because our ancestors did it in the past, doesn't mean that we should. One parallel is rape. We can do it, animals do it. In fact, ducks rape so much that they have mutated to have spiral genitalia, and our ancestors definitely did it. Rape was definitely a part of human history. None of those are reasons to rape. But the circle of rape! No! A duck is no more of an excuse to rape than a lion is an excuse to eat meat. Especially since today more than ever we have the ability to choose which circle of life we want to be in. Because it's really factually incorrect to say that there's only one circle of life. Before there were predators after colonization in New Zealand, was there no circle of life because there was no killing to eat animals? We can be in this circle of life where we feed directly on animal death, or we can be in this circle of life where we feed directly on plants. And if you really think this predatory circle of life is so important, then you should consider not being cremated or buried in a casket and instead fed to carnivorous animals. If it really plays that much of a role in your food choices, then it should probably play a pretty big role in your end-of-life choices. Just saying. Now to the next point altogether, the next topic which I've been asked to talk about a couple times, and that is the idea that if we all go vegan, that there are going to be so many animals that we're not killing, they're just going to overpopulate and overrun the earth, basically. Now, some of you may know I did do a very goofy movie trailer video on this topic.
We stopped eating animals, and all of a sudden, they were everywhere.
But I really don't think that it delivered any satisfactory answers or logic because it was just a parody. And I think when people bring this up, it's usually less of a valid concern and more of an attempt to poke holes in vegan logic or vegan morals, saying that if we went vegan, we'd have to kill a lot of animals. Your vegan ideas literally have to kill animals. You're worse than me. The main problem in logic here is that no, killing is not the only way to manage a population. When China decided to control its population, did it kill off a portion of their citizens? No, it just started controlling reproduction rates. So the obvious solution when transitioning to a vegan world would be to stop breeding for a long enough period to get the population down to a level that animal sanctuaries could support. And if the whole world went vegan, you can bet there would be a lot of animal sanctuaries. Alright, let's look at some of the details. As this Freakonomics graph shows, a pretty large portion of animals are forcefully impregnated depending on the species. So the first step in those populations would be simple: don't artificially inseminate. And in case you are wondering from the graph, yes, chickens are at 0, and that's because it's just not economically viable to artificially inseminate them right now, because there are so many. There are 50 billion chickens born and slaughtered every single year. To put that in perspective, there are only about 130 million humans born every year. So the question becomes, how do you prevent these animals from reproducing on their own uncontrollably? And there are a few options. There's separating the genders like many farms currently do. Then there are methods of birth control. We currently spay and neuter our pets, which many people, vegan or not, actually do have an ethical problem with. So you could go all the way and do animal birth control, as this Popular Science talks about with, quote, "A once-a-day birth control pill is now available for geese and pigeons." So you can bet they can make that for other animals as well. And I think the main point here is that no matter which option you choose to prevent uncontrolled reproduction of these animals, it's going to be a heck of a lot more ethical than the current system, which includes forced impregnation, confinement, and always ends in slaughter. All right, one of your questions on a very different topic that I want to address, because 'tis the fur season here in the Northern Hemisphere, is the idea that vegans should not wear faux fur because it glamorizes and promotes real fur in fashion. The concern here is that walking down the street looking really good in faux fur could make an onlooker be so impressed by the way you look that they could then go be inspired to buy some real fur, which is a real animal, and in that sense, really roundabout way, you're buying animal products. Now, there's currently no research quantifying that potentially negative effect, but I do believe that there are enough positive reasons that vegans should feel comfortable wearing faux fur. The first of which is normalizing veganism or creating a more accepting vegan climate. I kind of like to say you can be vegan and still rock your same look, whether you are a leathery motorcycle gang member or a furred out pop star diva. You can do all those things while not harming animals and not wearing animals. And though you can literally gorge yourself on vegan junk food all the time, a lot of people view a vegan lifestyle as a sort of abstinence. And to say that you don't need to just abstain from wearing animal products, you need to also abstain from anything that looks like it could be an animal product, could be a bit counterproductive. For comparison, imagine if I were like, hey, that Beyond Meat chicken looks way too realistic. You are glamorizing meat consumption so you can't even eat imitation meats. That's just not a sensible shaming. And there's one more powerful thing that wearing fur does. It can essentially be a way to draw attention to the fact that real fur is animals, and this faux fur I'm wearing is not animals. For example, Helen Mirren received some press for how good she looked in her faux fur outfit at the premiere of her movie Collateral Beauty. Do you notice anything? This no fur pin. So it can be a statement and a conversation piece. Well, a conversation that most people don't want to have. But the fact that a large portion of the population, vegan or not, is already disgusted by fur, the act of wearing fur is already an uncomfortable statement when it's real. Speaking of fur, let's talk about my alleged wig. Yes, about 10 times now I have had people be like, hey, your beard is a different color than your hair, therefore you are wearing a wig. Only possibility is that you're bald because you have a protein deficiency, because you're vegan. Whew, now I can eat my burger in peace, the one that I find too disgusting to touch with my bare fingers, so therefore I sandwich it between plant material. No, I do not have a wig. But since I got my new camera, and thank you so much Patreon contributors and A Well-Fed World for helping me get that and supporting me in general, since I got my new camera, the contrast is by default a little bit higher, so my hair looks darker and my beard looks lighter, and so I've got an influx of these types of comments. So I will just say right now, no, I do not have a wig. Yes, I have really thick, as you can now tell, more curly hair, and it's real. All right, I think I've wasted enough of your time on that subject. All right, in conclusion, I do not think that the fact that there is a circle of life which sometimes involves animals eating other animals justifies meat consumption. No, I do not think that we will have an overpopulated world of farm animals if we went vegan. And I also think that vegans should feel comfortable wearing faux fur. So if you disagree with that, feel free to let me know down below. And if you have any other questions for the next Q&A, feel free to ask that as well, or maybe they'll be turned into a whole video. I also want to mention there's been a request to make a video about how the body transitions on a vegan diet. I want to use scientific literature and a few anecdotes to show how this progresses. You know, after a couple weeks, the body adjusts to fiber. After 3 or 4 weeks, we can show a measurable clearing of arteries in studies. So if you are a vegan and you have any insights onto how your body changed through a vegan transition, feel free to let me know as well. Feel free to like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.
can't all go vegan. What we do with all the animals? You know, I bet they would totally take over the world. Yeah.
Dave wasn't pulling that out of his ass.
Animals have taken to the crop fields. At this rate, they will consume 1/3 of the world's grain supply by the end of the year.
Oh wait, animals already ate 1/3 of the world's grain before the world went